Today, I want to discuss the real common mistakes that people make that end up keeping them very unhealthy. This information becomes very important as you age, especially over 50. But if you're younger, take notes and you're definitely not going to find this information. If you just ask your average doctor, they're not experts in nutrition. They just don't get the training, whatever they recommend. Go in the opposite direction. It's about giving you a label for a certain condition. That's very descriptive, and then matching that with medication. I'm a lot more interested in getting to the root cause. So number 1, you want to really make sure that the source of your information that you get is based on someone who has a lot of experience that results in the problem you're trying to solve. Number 2, be very careful about accepting a diagnosis. That just doesn't seem right. Number 3, make sure that the solution or the treatment that you get it doesn't create more problems than your current symptoms, aka side effects. And that relates to this next point. If you expose yourself to too much stress, it kind of gets stuck into your mind and you're trying to go to bed and you can't sleep and you're worrying and you're in this constant state of fear. Unfortunately, nowadays it's almost impossible to avoid it because it's everywhere. The next thing I want to talk about before I get into nutrition is your environment. I didn't realize at first how important your environment was until I had this great opportunity to move out of the city into the farm. I'm going to tell you, having that space is such a therapy. It's so important to do this on a regular basis. And the next thing is regular, consistent exercise. And what exercise does is it kind of flushes out the cortisol and the adrenaline that builds up just from being on this planet. If you exercise more on a wave versus a sustained high pulse rate exercise, it's healthier. Next point. What are the most important nutrients that you should be getting on a regular basis? The most important one is vitamin D. Think about your genetics. You have like 20,000 to 25,000 different genes. Did you know that vitamin D influences 10% of those genes create a therapeutic effect for vitamin D? You need to use 10,000 or more of vitamin D3 to really create an effect. There's a medical doctor who specializes in autoimmune diseases. This medical doctor gets results. He has over 900 videos on testimonials before and after that you can see just using high doses of vitamin D3. There's certain doctors that are using high doses of vitamin D3 to remodel certain parts of the eye and repair really difficult things like glaucoma. There's other doctors using high doses of vitamin D3 to shrink fibroids. So vitamin D is super important for your health. And of course, getting more sun too. And we just don't go outside enough. The second most important nutrient is magnesium. It's very rare that anyone gets enough magnesium. Magnesium is involved in thousands of different things in the body. Every different type of heart disease usually has a magnesium deficiency, but magnesium goes way beyond the heart. You don't have enough magnesium. You can't make energy. So vitamin D, magnesium, and number 3 zinc. Zinc is a trace mineral. Zinc is very important. And a lot of people are deficient in zinc and they all really depend on each other. In other words, you could be taking a lot of vitamin D3 and be very deficient in magnesium and zinc. And vitamin D won't work. So you kind of need all 3 of those. And then the flip side, what are the 2 nutrients that you have to be careful of taking because they become very toxic? Number 1, calcium. As we age, calcium tends to plug everything up, and guess what? Magnesium is a regulator of that. And so if you don't take enough magnesium on a regular basis, you're going to put yourself at risk for heart disease. Why? Because you don't have the controlling factor of calcium and it gets into the soft tissues. And then the other nutrient that's even more deadly than too much calcium is too much iron. We have extreme difficulty in getting rid of iron. At the very most per day, we only get rid of 0.5 to 1 milligram. Yet the RDA for iron is 8 milligrams. And if you're a woman of childbearing age, it's like 18 milligrams. We're taking in way too much iron. If you have too much iron, you're going to rust out your organs. Want to start looking at labels, start avoiding certain things to make sure you don't overload yourself with iron. Even if you have a genetic problem with iron, the person really is not dying. They just have an accumulation of iron in the wrong place. Iron is very, very toxic and I never recommend taking it in a supplement. Next mistake is to avoid salt. There's a difference between sea salt and table salt. I always recommend sea salt because sea salt has 84 minerals. If someone is salt sensitive, in reality, they're just deficient in potassium because potassium and sodium work together. And we need a considerable amount of sodium and you get that from sea salt. And when you're deficient in salt, your cortisol goes up. This can affect your sleeping. This can make you stressed. It's a very important electrolyte. The RDA is for potassium. You need 47,100 milligrams. That's also really important for generating energy for your nerves and your muscles every single day. I don't think anyone gets that. Next point, someone recently asked the question, what should I be doing as I go through menopause? And I said, well, make sure you're consuming enough cholesterol foods. You're like, what? Are you kidding? Doctors trying to lower my cholesterol. Well, what happens when we age is we start having a decrease in hormones, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, things like that. And all of those hormones are built out of cholesterol. When you start to cut down your cholesterol, or you take certain medications that cut down your cholesterol, you really cut down those hormones that are already there. So, having sufficient amounts of the raw material, cholesterol, in your diet is very, very important, especially as you age. We need cholesterol for our brain, bile salts to help digest fats, but most importantly, we need cholesterol to make hormones. Where do we get cholesterol? Butter, eggs, dairy, shellfish. And just as a side note, just think about this. Diabetes is too much sugar in your blood. Wouldn't it make logical sense to start cutting down sugar and carbohydrates? In fact, what they focus more on is making sure you have some glucose tablets in your pocket or can in your pocket if your blood sugars become too low because the medication is pushing it too low. Why not just take less medication if you come off the carbs? This whole thing is insane, but it's not just about cutting down the sugar carbohydrates. It's cutting down this other carbohydrate called starch. Most of the starch that people are eating is not really listed as starch on the labels. It's listed as these other words, modified food starch, but then you get into the wheat flour, all of that is starch. Next point in your diet, you have proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Which one would be the most important to focus on as far as to create health? Proteins are the most important. Why? Because most of your body is protein, not just muscle, connective tissue, but your immune system, antibodies, white blood cells, and a person, an insect, an animal will continue to eat until their protein requirements are met and are satisfied. So just take a look at junk food, right? And there's not a lot of protein in junk food. You know, the cereal boxes, the crackers, the cookies, look at the protein. It's just like missing what food would give you the most healing route, the bat grass-fed beef grass-fed lamb. That's the most nutrient-dense food to heal the gut, to give you trace minerals, to give you B vitamins, but also to give you the highest quality protein. I mean, think about it. As we age, especially over 50, we start losing our muscle. You'd need to keep your protein at a higher level with each meal. You can also get a super concentrated amount of these nutrients from organ meats. I wish I liked liver. I don't like it. I'm not going to eat it. However, there's another liver that I love. In fact, sometimes I crave it and it's really delicious. It's cod liver. And the reason I'm bringing up this cod liver is because it's one of the best sources. I consume it probably twice a week. Alright. Next point is very, very important. The frequency of eating. Let's say you're consuming 500 calories per day and you were to consume them just twice a day versus 6 times a day. All those extra meals creates more of a problem for you because every time you eat, you stimulate insulin. Producing too much insulin is probably the single biggest problem right now behind so many chronic illnesses, not just diabetes, but a fatty liver, high blood pressure. We talked about reducing carbohydrates. Now we're talking about reducing snacking, grazing at night. It's just not good. If you could just take your snacks, if it's nuts or whatever, and just push them to the meal and just have 2 meals a day. I think that would be awesome because then you can actually do intermittent fasting and you can create a lot of improvements with that because it's going to reduce your insulin. Next point you should know about autoimmune diseases where your immune system is attacking itself. It's the #1 problem out there. I think it's a combination of a couple things. Number 1, the person has low vitamin D, but I don't think it's the only cause, and it has to do with microbes, viruses, and other pathogens that are constantly trying to invade our body and create all these problems. And one of the strategies that they do is they downgrade your vitamin D receptor. Now, normal amounts of vitamin D don't do anything for you because the microbe is really smart. There's something else that occurs just before this infection, because in practice, I ran into this. These people almost always had a stress event right before they developed this autoimmune disease: loss of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of something. What happens when a person goes through a severe shock? What happens to the immune system? It becomes suppressed with high levels of cortisol. Things can happen to the immune system, and if you're already low in vitamin D3, you can have this shift in the immune system where this immune system starts inappropriately attacking its own tissue and develops an autoimmune disease. Not only that, prednisone, which is a synthetic type of cortisol, will shut down the immune system too. This is why they use it. For autoimmune diseases, anything like rashes on the skin. The greatest single thing you can do for stress is exercise and do things to change the environment that you're in. It's not exposing yourself to so much insanity. Now the last thing, and I think one of the most important things you need to know about in relation to your health, is the recognition that your microbiome in your gut actually is an organ. People think it's like some extra thing that's really not part of us. It is part of us. It's way more than our own cells. And it's called the gut microbiome, and the significance or impact that those microbes create on your health is huge. Why the heck would we ever want to even take an antibiotic and kill them off? It's beyond me. What you have to realize is when you take an antibiotic, you will never have the same microbes ever again. A lot of these microbes never grow back. It's a lie that they told you that, oh yeah, you're just going to actually decrease the number of microbes and they're just going to come back to normal. Just like before. No, That's a lie. The importance of supporting the gut microbes as an organ is vital for what immune protection. The neurotransmitters that are created, your mood, your cognitive function is influenced by the microbes. There's certain vitamins that are made by these microbes. A lot of your digestion is related to microbes. Your ability to get rid of cancer is related to these microbes. Your ability to sleep good is related to these microbes. The list goes on and on and on. That's why it's so important to, on a regular basis, consume fermented foods. Sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, and taking a very good probiotic would be very, very smart. I covered a lot of stuff in this video. I think all of it's super important, especially if you're over 50, but I would apply a lot of this information before you're 50. Start creating your health right now, because health has to be created. It doesn't just automatically happen, but I've given you the key ingredients for creating health. Thank you for watching.